Commissioner, Mr. President, I rise again, I'm afraid, to make the same old hoary speech that I've been making here for several years, and that is, it is my opinion that you do not really understand the concept of banking. All the banks are broke. Bank Santander, Deutsche Bank, Royal Bank of Scotland, they're all broke. And why are they broke? It isn't an act of God. It isn't some sort of tsunami. They're broke because we have a system called fractional reserve banking, which means that banks can lend money that they don't actually have. It's a criminal scandal, and it's been going on for too long. To add to that problem, you have moral hazard, a very significant moral hazard from the political sphere. And most of the problem starts in politics and central banks, which are part of the same political system. We have counterfeiting, sometimes called quantitative easing, but counterfeiting by any other name. The artificial printing of money, which if any ordinary person did, they'd go to prison for a very long time. And yet governments and central banks do it all the time. Central banks repress the amount of interest that rates are, so we don't have the real cost of money, and yet we blame the real retail banks for manipulating LIBOR. The sheer effrontery of this is quite astonishing. It's central banks that manipulate interest rates, Commissioner. And plus, underneath all this, we talk loosely, in a rather cavalier fashion, do we not, about deposit guarantees. So when banks go broke through their own incompetence and chicanery, the taxpayer picks up the tab. It's theft from the taxpayer. And until we start sending bankers, and I include central bankers and politicians, to prison for this outrage, it will continue.
Welcome everyone, Simon here from the Wales of Wall Street. Today's topic around the US debt ceiling. We're going to cover that in a bit and bring in the infrastructure of our minds to some of the things that we've been speaking about recently and how it's all kind of tying together. And is this the time where crypto, things like Bitcoin, Ripple, XRP, truly get their full adoption as the solution to this absolute tsunami of a black swan event? Guys, let's take a look at the browser and take a more detailed look as to what we want to talk about in the coming minutes. So guys, obviously there's been an announcement recently, of course, and the time is running out for the US government to get the notion to improve the timescales of deadline towards obtaining the debt ceiling deadline to move to next year. This has been rejected quite recently by the Republican sections of government, which is quite fascinating, really, all of this, how it's sort of pushing ahead. To be honest, I think it's incredible. I think what's key to all of this is thinking about the solution that is potentially already here, guys. And isn't it coincidental that all of these things always happen simultaneously around the world? Okay, so debt ceilings, okay, essentially that is what they call a debt limit. Okay, so this is the amount that the US Treasury is allowed to borrow to pay its bills. Okay, so constantly for decades upon decades, countries around the world have just borrowed money from, i.e. central banks, Federal Reserves, kind of like our dear friend just mentioned a minute ago. This has been going on for so long. Inflation occurs through the supply mechanism of money that's pretty much printed out of nowhere, out of thin air. I mean, I learned a lot about that maybe 10, 12 years ago from a multitude of information platforms. One in particular of interest was like Zeitgeist. Now, a lot of that could be seen as like propaganda and things like this and an alternative view. But it was very structural in the way that it explained how income tax came about and tax in general, and the Federal Reserve and all of this malarkey around inflation, and essentially being able to manipulate and control a mechanism of people and business worldwide. So in this instance with the debt ceiling, the income tax is essentially not enough. Therefore, the government continues to borrow. Now, America alone, this is incredible, $28 trillion. $28 trillion is what is required to obtain the country in itself. Now, that is, I think I read in this article somewhere along the lines that this number has increased 78 times since 1960. When does this stop, guys? Because quite frankly, obviously the world is an absolute mess at the moment. We sometimes sit there scratching our heads wondering if we're in a real world or a fake world. Who knows what's going on anymore? Maybe Elon Musk's narrative of a simulation is true, and actually, you know, we're kind of fizzled now in our minds between digital and what's real. But let's not go too far off on a tangent here. But this debt ceiling, of course, as I mentioned, the Senate Republicans have essentially blocked the notion for extending this debt ceiling into 2022. And there's a deadline, guys, coming up in the next 10 to 14 days. I mean, what is it? The 15th of October, I believe, is the day where America could default. And the 18th of December is the date that is supposedly provisioned for the deadline to obtain the increase in allowing of borrowing. Why has this been blocked? Of course, there's a political background to this, of course, but I think there's always a bigger picture. There are a multitude of powerful people in this world that go beyond presidencies and prime ministers and this, that, and we talk about all the time, like the World Economic Forum, Agenda 30 program. These aren't conspiracies, they're real. Like, you can download the Agenda 30 document on the UN website. You can pretty much plan in the next 8 or 9 years of your life, to be honest. It's pretty laid out, you know, in a nice pattern there for you to realize what's occurring around the world. But of course, the World Economic Forum really details the amount of power that they have, with the multitude of rich families, including Schwab and all the other guys that are there, you know, essentially dictating where the world should be going and how it should be done. Prime ministers and presidents are just spokespeople, the narrative of people who pay for the campaign money and try and influence their essentially what they want for the next few years of power, as it were. So there's loads of things to think about in the background, but just get out of the way. Biden condemns Republican stunt blocking the debt ceiling hike. Guys, I think the Black Swan event has been long overdue. We're talking about a substantial you know, collapse essentially of the world in a multitude of areas. Here in the UK, of course, I've spoken about in previous videos, the TVs, the tube that you watch, and the social media, which is arguably the new system of televised media, essentially, you know, portraying multitude of nonsense, circus array of information that essentially shows you just how much it influences people and their decision making, and the lack of thought in their people's own minds to question things, to be curious. We've kind of removed that out of the education system over the years, and the ability to think for ourselves and really see what's going on in the world. If you switch your TV off, of course, there's an element of ignorance that you do need to keep in line with a couple of things, of course, that go on in the world. But in general, what's portrayed, the entertainment aspects, the circus nonsense, trying to entertain them and distract people consistently while all this nonsense goes on in the background. And we'll play a clip at the end of one of my favorite films, The Network, from 1975, because it's just nothing changes. Everyone just goes round and round in a circle. The US debt default approaching. Is Bitcoin a last resort? Well, of course, Bitcoin is growing with confidence and awareness across the world. I still believe it's more along the lines of a gold standard kind of value token or crypto asset. To become a currency, of course, it needs some stabilization. How that will come, I do not know. But you know, there are bridging applications coming for the forefront soon. Ripple XRP working very hard in the background for the interoperability and the bridging. I truly believe the SEC nonsense is a complete distraction, and it's being delayed so that potentially the American US dollar can be saved for a CBDC structure to fight essentially the digital yuan, which is becoming more and more powerful day by day. It's already been in operation in trials methods across China and other areas around that way. So there's a big, massive situation going on here. The Federal Reserve is a private company with banks such as the Rothschilds, Warburg, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, among those wield control. By the way, guys, for those that don't know these families, go check them out. We did a video recently or a couple of months back now actually, around JP Morgan and Sachs and their involvement in CBDCs and the Federal Reserve and how money came about and how we come to today's world with monetary inflation and things. The Rothschilds in particular are very interesting, very powerful family. Again, these are the rulers of the world, guys. Okay, Rothschilds created a document in 2010. You can download it off their organizational website, and they basically played out the 10-15 years ahead from that point of 2010 onwards. And if you read this thing, it's like looking at a history book from essentially up to today's points with pandemics and stuff, all the way back to then. It's bizarre. It's like you're reading almost a transcript of what the world should be like and should be followed, because these guys have so much money and power that they can make this happen. Honestly, it's really interesting. Like I said, be open-minded about it. Have a read of that. Go on the Rothschilds organization websites and download the foundation document that they created in 2010. It is staggering. I could not believe what I was reading when I read it last year. I was like, what? This is like one of those into the future things where you just portray what's going to happen and it just happens. It's like the Mayan calendar or something ridiculous. Like, who was that famous historic person that kept predicting the future? I can't remember his name now, but it's along those lines. It's really bizarre, guys. Just check it out. But of course, here mentions, of course, the blockchain's ledger that records transactions, blah, blah. SEC Chairman Gary Gensler, you can't trust these people, guys. They'll tell you one thing and they'll do another. Follow the money. I remember watching this video in particular, telling people to say fiat. Why? It's going to be replaced by CBDCs. CBDCs worry me in that sense, because they're essentially going to be government controlled. And when we're entering a system where everything's on smartphones and eventually human sensors built within us, because the patents are going through, as we mentioned in previous videos, you've got Visa going through with a patent for biometric payments. You've got Microsoft going through government at the moment with patents for human sensors. All of this is going to be interoperable with AI, algorithm, everything that we do moving forward in the world. Why would you want fiat? Like, this is all going to be replaced. The alternative to CBDCs, of course, is cryptocurrency, and in its finest form, that's the decentralized method. But CBDCs will have utilization with the likes of Ripple, the Stellar Lumens, Zenfin, all of these major companies that will essentially have not much choice but to integrate with all these these existing banking institutions across the world, including these very crazy families in existence, JP Morgan, etc. JP Morgan, of course, are creating their own tokenomics. It's all coming to play, guys. And I'm just throwing this out there. The BOFA outage shuts out thousands online. Services now restored. The Bank of England going fully down on the 1st of October. This is what is going on, guys. We reported this in a video a while back of structural changes from the federal the World Federal Reserve was going down, shutting down. It was like they were testing systems of blockchain and CBDCs in the background to say, well, actually, this is a major problem, especially with the energy situation that we've got worldwide, including here in the UK, and the Green Initiative. It's almost like a circus, guys. I'm trying to get this thought process to you in a way that hopefully is understandable, in the sense that just take a step back. I'm not saying this is all definitely happening, but it's very coincidental. All these things occurring at similar times, similar transitional period in the world, with the same planned agenda 2030. We've got the COP26 coming up as well, of course. It's all so convenient. Of course, masses of complaints and this, that, and the other. We've seen today Bitcoin news about the whole market cap being more powerful than Facebook, which of course has gone down today with multitude of server issues. At what point, because we're all on smartphones now, guys, and internet-based things and digital things, all our my local banks are closing down left, right, and center, and you're then forced on the app and your live chat and this, that, and the other. And then eventually with CBD systems and the integration of everything else, they'll control your money. They'll control your behavioral pattern and everything that you do, everything you say, social scoring. It's all coming, guys. This is not theory. It's coming. And the whole tokenomics aspect, some of the things that we're invested in are programming technologies and protocols for that kind of system. It's crazy. When you sit and really think about all the things you're investing, you might just see them as names and things like this on charts. But if you do the research on 90% of them, they're all integration systems for this world we are moving into. Here in the UK, the military arrives to ease fuel crisis. Well, first of all, I haven't seen one military personnel in any of my locations within a 20-30 mile radius, certainly today, on the way to work or anything like that. I do think a lot of it's nonsense just on the media to make people pressurized and feel, we've seen it last week, how manipulated people can be with the fact that a simple conversation on a news channel with Boris Johnson, saying that a potential fuel shortage when there isn't one, what reaction that was. And all of a sudden, for the last 2 weeks, we've been having to queue for 2-3 hours to get fuel. And that won't stop for a while. We've got the energy crisis continuously in the UK at the moment as well. Energy companies falling left, right and centre. And we've got all the other things going on as well. It's not just our country, it's every country. And do you not think that blockchain technology being here already, ready to go, all these systems are failing conveniently? It makes sense to me. Universal basic income. Now back to this original story here, from the whole aspect of this debt ceiling. As with so many catastrophes, the economical disadvantages will be disproportionately affected. Food assistance benefits would stop nationwide, monthly child tax credits would be delayed, and compensation for veterans and pension payments would lapse. Guys, please think about this. This is not just the US. This will happen in a multitude of countries around the world as a domino effect. The dollar has been crashing for a long time, probably certainly since the 70s when Nixon removed the backing of the gold. We've covered that in a previous video as well. It's all a domino effect, guys. This is a complete restructure of the world, the Great Reset that everyone's talked about. This is all World Economic Forum narrative. It's all in there for the last few years. You can check out all the URLs. Build Back Better, the Great Reset. These are all URLs purchased like 3 or 4 years ago. It's crazy if you go and do the research in the background. But my point here is all of these things, as I've said many times, basic universal income is coming. It's being trialled in a multitude of countries already, including Canada. We've had it in Wales recently. The scrapping here in the UK of universal credit. The basic universal income, like was promoted by Elon Musk last year, for example, is a system, and I know this for a fact because I know people that are on the trial system personally. This is a system that if you're in debt, the government will come to you and buy all your debt away from you, but it will own all your assets that you can still use, so you can still live in your home, you can still drive your car, but they own it. And you will get a certain income every week and you'll be pleased about it. And it will be based eventually, when tokenomics and blockchain comes in, it will be based eventually on behavior and social scoring. Honestly, do the research, look into it, and this is how it will become. Because it'll come to a point where if you don't do something, you will be restricted with money and you have nothing to do about it. Because everything is now digital, you can't go and complain to anyone, and it'll all be on a tokenomic blockchain system. Trust me. You guys might think differently, but it's really something to think about, and it is coming. There's no doubt about it. But look at the links. How could it affect me? All of these benefits disappearing. Can you imagine working for most of your life, and then you get to your pension time and it gets delayed, or it might even get stopped completely because the government's gone bust? This is why I'm talking here about where this says here about the US debt. Is Bitcoin a last resort? Well, it's not just about Bitcoin. There's a multitude of blockchains and cryptocurrencies out there to take control of this entire situation. Think about it, guys. Think about this whole entire scenario of what is going on worldwide in your own countries as well as our own here in the UK. It's not coincidence. It's pre-planned. The problem is created because they have the solution already that they then bring out, and everyone thinks this is a great idea and they get used to it, they're happy about it, and they crack on with life because no one questions anything anymore. Guys, I'm stopping it there. Let's go into the chart before I forget. But we're going to look at Ripple XRP as it's a bit of a topic, of course, ongoing in this situation. So let's just take a look. So XRP Ripple at the moment is still floating just above that dollar. If you remember, we kept this buyback box in here. I did put a buy-in order at just over $1. I think we hit that today. $1, 1.0059, guys. Happened as if we knew it would happen. As we said before, there is a possibility that we could still come round to this 80 to 87 cent mark just to retest those areas at some point before we see a nice drive upwards towards the end of October into November for XRP Ripple. But I'm liking the positivity here. We're still within our previous channel funnel here that we drew a while back. So we've got a bit of a way to go before we get back onto a proper trend line, but it's nice to see that we're within this space still. Next levels of interest, as we drew in previously yesterday, of course, there's this previous resistance level that we've seen on a multitude of areas across the last few months, and this will continue to stay there. So we're still seeing resistance there, and that's why I said, if you remember in the last video, if we get 2 or 3 days at this position, we may see a further drop down, and that's where I think we might get to that 97 cent mark, or certainly to maybe the 87 cent mark. We've got to keep cautious of that. Irrespective of this, we do have finally get some green here on the histogram just below here in the buy-in volume. So the buy-in volume is really kicking in. The MACD gap is widening. So this is really down to the next 24-48 hours to showcase, have we got this new line 104.62 as a support line? Can we close over that period or that section of the chart? If we can, we will start pushing this resistance, trying to obtain that sort of 111.54 mark before we can really start pushing that previous 125 areas between 121 and 125. Now I do think that's probably a bit far off still. I think that's maybe the 3rd or 4th week of November, but this is a really intriguing and confident area for XRP to be in. The RSI is floating around 49, so there's obviously plenty of room for movement upwards. However, we're still in a critical straight line stage here, which means that we're kind of in a limbo state. We're not quite sure what we're doing yet. This is what it means. There's no strategic lines, there's no strategic movement or specific movement occurring. So it's very much flat line, which is, in my opinion, very good. It's a good opportunity to accumulate more, of course, but it's also an opportunity to reassess, is there a last grab opportunity before we take an upward trend? Because obviously if you have some ready to accumulate with from taking profits, or if you're just ready with bags, you can't really go wrong, because you're anticipating a potential drop. If it hits fantastic. If it doesn't, no problem. You've still got your bags of XRP, and we can take those to the moon with us, right? So I'm really looking forward to that playing out over the next 24-48 hours. Let's see where we close today. I think that'll be a significant interest into where we move to in the coming days. 12% up on the week, 17% still down on the month, but that does include I think maybe even at least 2 Bitcoin drops there to affect the chart, of course. In general, the general market, 6 months 12% up and 371% up year to date. Guys, let us know in the comments below what you think the price will be in the end of 2021 for Ripple, and we'll put some of the best ones in the chart for sure as we move towards those. Can you believe it's nearly the middle of October already? So yeah, like I said, by the end of October and into November, I do believe that we'll start pushing up to that 125 mark. All-time high is a bit far off still, but I do anticipate perhaps certainly in the weeks within November and leading into December, we will definitely smash through that. Maybe a bit earlier. Let's see what happens on the 15th or 18th of this month with the whole debt crisis in the US and worldwide as well, because truly I think this is more than meets the eye, guys. Absolutely. Guys, I think we're going to wrap that up there. I'm going to leave you with one of my favorite films clips here, and guys, we will hopefully see you and XRP on the moon. Take care, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression. Everybody's out of work or scared of losing their job. The dollar buys a nickel's worth. Banks are going bust. Shopkeepers keep a gun under the counter. Punks are running wild in the street, and there's nobody anywhere who seems to know what to do, and there's no end to it. We know the air is unfit to breathe, and our food is unfit to eat. We sit watching our TVs while some local newscaster tells us that today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. It's like everything everywhere is going crazy, so we don't go out anymore. We sit in the house, and slowly the world we're living in is getting smaller, and all we say is, please, at least leave us alone in our living rooms. Let me have my toaster and my TV and my steel-belted radios, and I won't say anything. Just leave us alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone. I want you to get mad. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. God damn it. My life has value. So, I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!